1 week season.
1 week season, fam. La Familia, welcome back. It is Monday, July 1st. We are already in July, 2 months of drafting down. I am Mike Johnson, mjohnson86, as I am known in those DFS and best ball streets. We are coming to you live this Monday, July 1st, to talk about some best ball market situations, specifically those brought to our attention or wanting to be discussed by our Best Ball Plus subscribers. As always on Mondays, or as usually, missed it one week, and I was all by my lonesome. But this week we do have my esteemed co-host, Stat ATL, Billy Gableman. Billy, welcome. How we doing today?
We're doing great. I just threw a link in the chat, or at least a message in the chat that we were doing it live today. So maybe
we go.
We got some OWS folks who will hop in with us.
Perfect. It's yeah, you're in a blank room there this week. Big move for you. All set, ready to rock?
You know, I was happy we were able to push this from Sunday to Monday to do it live in the morning because the Xfinity Comcast guy was here at 8:15 a.m. So I got internet now. But yeah, moved this weekend. But yeah, most of the rooms look like this with nothing on the walls and just boxes because we moved yesterday. So
gotcha. We obviously, so at Best Ball Plus at 1 week season, my focus is primarily on drafters and DraftKings. Today we will be drafting a DraftKings draft in their Millie Maker contest. As we talk about the state of the market and the different players and whatnot, but drafters is, as I talk about with our subscribers, kind of the top place for me to play. Pretty wild that they filled their $2 contest already, 56,000 entries, and they just filled. Was it Friday night? What the
Thursday.
Days are all? I got two little ones, so the days all kind of flow together. Was it Friday that it filled?
It was either Wednesday or Thursday. It did not make it to Friday.
Okay, yeah. So it's funny because I had that draft plan, and was kind of thinking I was thinking I was gonna load up on the $2 in July, but then the way it broke down, it was it just took off, in the last 2 weeks. So I'm sitting here with 80 slow drafts on my. I don't know that. I actually don't know the number. I just know that every morning when I wake up, night before bed, and at lunchtime, I am having to make 20 picks.
Yeah, even if you're doing it quick,
yeah.
It's still got to take you 30 seconds a minute a pick because you want, depending on where you are in the draft, you want to look at the board a little bit and kind of see what you got and what might be available for you in your next pick.
I think doing it's kind of a good training exercise though, because you have that time to think through the picks, and you're in those situations. So I actually feel like I've been training myself. It's like going to the range for golf, getting just a lot of reps thinking through different situations. So now when I'm doing the fast drafts, it's usually a situation that I've been in where I've had a similarly structured team, similar players on the board, that sort of thing. So, it's had some unexpected benefits, I guess I'll say.
Yeah, I would echo those. I would echo those sentiments, and similar to you, I've got a bunch of slow drafts going. So, and for me, I'm trying to diversify my situation a little bit. If I'm starting 3 wide receivers, a lot of the times when it comes to me in the fourth with maybe similar starts, I don't want to just keep doing the same thing over and over. So I like to kind of take a little bit. And for me, in a slow draft, when it kind of comes to my turn, after I make my pick, a lot of time I'll go into, the queue and kind of queue up a couple of guys for a little bit later in the round. So that when it comes back to me 2 or 3 days from now, when I get to pick again in that draft, I kind of can look, oh yeah, okay, I was going to wait on quarterback on this one. Like I've got whatever. I got two Jags, so maybe I'll wait and take Trevor Lawrence in the 12th or whatever, and I'll wait on quarterback here. Just trying to help myself so I don't have to go through that exercise on the clock, even though you've got 8 hours.
Right.
Just to kind of, same as you were saying, just try to take a little bit of a different approach, just because, we all have our guys that we like. And obviously you're not taking them every single time, but my first instinct when I get to this spot and these 5 guys are available, it's like, well, this is the guy I like best. So yeah. I don't want to end up with too many of whoever, Travis Etienne in the 4th round rosters.
Right. And, for any newer subscribers or people just hopping on, obviously this is on X and YouTube, so our free streams. Our Best Ball Plus product, it has some in-depth written work. We have at least 3 training podcasts or training sessions per week private to the subscribers. I've been doing some training sessions in our Discord, which we haven't had a huge turnout. We're working on being able to record with the video, but basically I go through my thought process as I go through those slow drafts, kind of training that way. And our Best Ball Plus product, the price does drop today to $159. We started the year at $199 and kind of gradually cascading. So the July 1 price drop is in effect to $159. And that's good for, you still have access to all the previous training sessions that you've missed once you get that link to our feed. And then obviously everything going forward, rankings, storyboards. I've got my drafters thing, which I am kind of my drafters Bible, I guess. And I'm close to having that polished up, hoping to have that within the next week. And then kind of fun event that we'll have coming up within the next probably 2 weeks, still finalizing the date, but I'm going to do a drafters marathon. So basically like this, but live streaming, drafting, going to bring a few guests on, hopefully yourself, probably try to get Hilo, X, and JM in here, and some other people from around the industry. So that'll be cool. So everybody listen up, watch out for that. My draft has started, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I ended up with the with the 3rd pick and took Tyreek Hill. So we can just go ahead and keep talking. I'm going to grab the questions from the chat and So if you got anything.
This was, that marathon day was news to me. We didn't talk about that off air today, so that's super exciting. We're gonna have to get a little side bet, going if we run 1 or 2 of those for, whoever. If we run a few of them, whoever has the highest finishing team, maybe we each throw $20, and at the end of the season.
There you go. It's unregulated gambling you're talking about there, sir. I'm kidding. Sorry, I'm just copy and pasting the stuff from the Discord so that we can talk about the right stuff. So anything from the first 2 rounds that stuck out to you in drafts recently? Has there any guys that have been falling, rising that, have been notable to you?
Well, I haven't been doing a lot on DraftKings. I've been doing mostly focusing on drafters like yourself. I think early on, first 2 rounds, the biggest faller that I've seen is probably, and he went in the 1st round this draft, is probably Jahmyr Gibbs. Like I'm finding him kind of falling from that 11, 12, 13, 14 range. He's kind of sliding more to almost pick 20. In a lot of the drafts that I've done so far. And so I've found myself a couple of times I've kind of taken him to just kind of see what that build kind of works out to be. Yeah. What about yourself? First 2 rounds, what have you been seeing in your drafts?
Yeah, I mean, on drafters specifically, Saquon Barkley being like a third round pick,
Hmm.
he's going like around the 2-3 turn. I've gotten him a couple times at like
30.
pick 30, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Which is obviously Best Ball Plus subscribers know a lot of my general. Oh, I'm on the clock here. Um, uh, we'll take Ayuk. So I've got Tyreek and Ayuk to start. My general thought process and strategies, but uh, yeah, having a player like him fall to the mid third round certainly challenges some of my, you know, I guess traditional or like usual strategies. Kind of have to adjust to the board. That's one of the things I've been talking about on the training sessions, and we'll talk about some more this week. Is the state of the market's a little different, and it's different this time of year too, right? Like
Hmm.
the casuals are not. It's not the same draft rooms right now that we're going to have a month from now, or even more than that. So let's see. I've got Hill and Ayuk. So I will take. Let's take the top guy. We'll take Mike Evans here. I know that's your boy, Mike Evans.
I I just think he's a guy that on drafters I've been taking in the third round a ton. I know that we've kind of talked, on the behind the paywall about some things about looking at your first 3 round picks. I have at least 10 starts with the exact 3 guys that you have
Mm-hmm.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd be curious to see. I haven't done a ton of DraftKings drafts. Be curious to see how the board shakes up a little bit different. You hardly ever see Travis Kelsey go this early in the third round on drafters.
Mm-hmm. The one of the questions from our Discord was thoughts on San Francisco wide receivers and how trade talk impacts. And I think we've touched on this multiple times already throughout these, and it's just one of those wait and see type things. Um, generally speaking, I think Ayuk is the one that is most commonly suggested as the guy who will be traded because he's kind of up for the extension. Um, and I think the Commanders and the Steelers are the two that I've heard the most chatter about. So for him, I don't know. I think that moving to I guess, lesser offense, but becoming a more integral part of the offense, probably kind of a wash. He's
Hmm.
probably stays in that same range. I don't think he drops beyond like that mid third round range if he gets traded. And I don't think he like moves up into like the Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua stratosphere. So, I think we've talked about this before that, you know, start of the second round through mid third round tier of wide receivers, generally speaking, pretty flat. And it's kind of a coin flip between all of them. Um, I think Debo, I think Debo could benefit. But again, I don't know that he becomes like a top, like he doesn't get into that like top 6 type range at wide receiver, even if Ayuk were gone. I think Kittle and Pearsall would be the kind of the big movers. Kittle would, in my opinion, jump into that like Kincaid McBride range of tight ends, and Pearsall would probably end up like a late 7th, early 8th round pick. Um, that's kind of my general thoughts on it. I see you nodding.
I think that I kind of agree with a lot of that. I think we'll just kind of build on that a little bit. And obviously, this is all just speculation. But, if Ayuk were to go to the Commanders, I think was one team that we've kind of seen. I think the person on the board that it would probably affect the most for me would be McLaurin. Like,
Yeah.
I'm right now, he's a guy that I find myself taking a good bit. In the 4th round. I've seen him fall to the 5th round on drafters. He's a guy that I think that 4th round value would get pushed down the board quite a bit. if somebody like Ayuk was traded to the Commanders.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only are you dealing with a rookie quarterback and the unknowns with that, but now you've got, significantly increased competition around, around targets. So
yeah, I think that's pretty accurate assessment. And then I took Trey McBride at the 10th pick of the 4th round here.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at I might take one of these quarterbacks. Mahomes, Hurts, and Lamar are all available here. But I have, with having the 3rd pick here, I know one of them is going to be available on the way back here in the 5th. So I took McBride in the 4th. What's that?
I was going to ask, in this type of situation, the board comes to you here. Do you ever consider grabbing Lamar with the expectation that you taking Lamar off the board increases the possibility of Andrews falling to you and you being able to get that pairing, get that stack? I know you're not, you don't like to force it. This just seemed like a natural way that it would work out for you.
Yeah, and honestly, that's probably what I would have done if it wasn't this draft in this format. But I wanted to talk about, so there's it worked out good because I got McBride and Mahomes. And two of the questions. What one was on the Arizona wide receiver room, and one was on Kansas City options. So figured Mahomes, that way I can take one of his receivers, stack him up, and chat about that. So let's start with Arizona. I took McBride. The question was, how does Michael Wilson and Zay Jones fit into all this? All I hear about is Marvin Harrison Jr., McBride, and Dortch. Shout out Inner Circle fam. I took some heat because I questioned King Dortch in the Discord. So generally, basically what I'd said about Dortch was, so he's a 26-year-old wide receiver, undrafted. He's smaller than me, and I'm not a large human. He's like 5'7", 170. I mean, he's a decent athlete, but I think he ran like a 4.55 or something. He's not like this burner at a small size. So just generally speaking, the archetype of player is not the type that I get overly excited about. He's going very late in drafts, and I get why people like him because he has some projectable volume. They think okay, he can be the slot guy, but with those later round picks, I'm generally targeting guys who have the athletic profile. Obviously, it's very rare, but a guy like Puka Nacua last year. Obviously, that's in hindsight, it looks great, but also, I mean, he's large, he's good after the catch. He produced at a high level coming out of college, and he was still very young. So I think it's very hard to believe that we're sitting there May 1st next year and we're yeah, Greg Dortch is coming off a 90 catch season or an 80 catch season. So I mean, I think he can benefit, but he can have a solid season, but especially I usually draft pretty wide receiver heavy type teams. So it's going to be hard for him to contribute a ton to those rosters. To the bigger question on how that room fits together. So I think Harrison is obviously the alpha. And then McBride had a huge season last year, and he's going to be a big part of what they do. They did draft Tip Ryman, 3rd or 4th round tight end they drafted this year. I'm going to go ahead and take, Rashee Rice just went. Well, I'll take Worthy on the way back then. So I'll take Hopkins here, get Worthy in the queue. So they drafted a big tight end. Now, if you look at what the Cardinals have done as an organization since their regime change about 16 months ago now, maybe 18 months, I guess. We're in July already. So all the receivers they brought in, you've got Marvin Harrison Jr., Zay Jones, Michael Wilson. They're all big. They're all like 6'2", 6'3". McBride and is a big physical specimen. Like he's compared sometimes to like Gronk. And then Tip Ryman is like 6'7", 260. He's like huge. So I think like you just reading the tea leaves, what the organization prioritizes. I think that they may run more 12 personnel this year with Ryman, or even if they have a different tight end emerge during camp, like as the inline tight end, and move McBride out. And then I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be on the field basically every play. He can play in the slot as well. And then I think like Dortch, Wilson, Jones, and Dortch will all kind of rotate and be more situational roles, with Wilson kind of being like the de facto number 2 wide receiver. And then, they'll mix it up. Maybe they have Dortch when on snaps that Dortch is in, he'll be in the slot with Harrison and Wilson out wide. Maybe when Zay comes in, Harrison moves into the slot. When Ryman comes in, McBride moves out to the slot. So they've got a lot of flexibility there, but I think Wilson, McBride, and Harrison are the ones who are going to be on the field like 80% plus of the snaps.
Yeah, I think I want to give a good shout out to you and to Hilo. I don't remember who did NFC and who did AFC, but for any I was going to say, for any OWS subscribers who are tuning in here, don't forget Mike and Hilo did a great team preview, team by team. It's a really fantastic read. Highly recommend if you haven't done a ton, if you haven't checked it out, or if you but you haven't done a lot of drafters, DraftKings, Underdog. It's a great refresher to just kind of read through, quickly. I mean, they're not all that quick because they're kind of in depth. It does take some time to get through 32 of them. But it's a great read, and hats off to you and Hilo for for your time on that. It really, really can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, and we'll update that once we get into like early August training camp, just because there has been we wrote those immediately after the NFL draft. So there have been some changes and whatnot, some things continuing to happen. So kind of once we have, there's a lot of things, like you have like rumors on stuff like Nick Chubb and TJ Hawkinson coming off of injury, other guys, Kendrick Bourne for the Patriots. You've got, some guys who got cut, some guys who will get cut or get traded. T. Higgins signed his contract with Cincy. Looks like he'll be there at the start. So a lot of the things that were written in those will be refreshed, right around the start of training camp. Once we have a bigger, broad picture, it won't be a full redo of the whole write-up, because a lot of the things are pretty locked in, but it will update for those situations. So whether you're just tuning in right now, Monday morning, July 1st, to listen to a couple guys chat about the NFL, and you're not going to draft for a while, or you're really locked into it, either way, that'll be a good thing for people to kind of, like you said, kind of prepare themselves, and good for DFS as well, right? To have a macro idea of what these teams look like. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm back on the board here. All right, so I've got 5 receivers. I don't have a running back yet. Options are not terrific, but I'm going to go ahead and take Tony Pollard, pair him up with Hopkins. So I've got little team stack for the Titans going on there. See who comes back around for the next one. Do you have any, I'll let you talk. I've been chatting away. Do you have any thoughts on this Titans backfield?
I think that they qualify for a strategy that that's something that I'm a fan of. This type of roster is not one that I would be kind of considering that for. I would say Best Ball Plus subscribers are well familiar with what Mike and I are, or at least what I'm alluding to here. To me, I think this is probably a split. Maybe a slight favor, 60-40 maybe to Pollard. But I think for me, this is kind of more of a wait and see. This is probably a backfield where if I'm taking one guy, I'm probably diversifying a little bit. This, I think the Titans are one of those situations where it's likely to be close to a split. But if one of them were to get hurt in training camp, they would be, the other guy would benefit significantly and would see a 2, 3, 4 round rise up the board. To me, if Spears gets hurt in training camp, in this draft, like Jacobs and Kamara are going in the 5th round. Like I would take Pollard over both of those two personally if he's got the backfield to himself.
Yeah. Well, and there's obviously a lot of our thoughts and how, we wrap our heads around things is focused on drafters, but like, to your point, so like it's the NFL, right? And these are running backs. And what happens to running backs in the NFL? They get hurt. So obviously the example people always like to make, and I'm not like, what you just said is like how is right. Like if this is the dude who, tears his knee up in training camp, it totally alters that team. But like, that's how people like to think about it. But I like from a realistic standpoint, it's more likely that just both of these guys you're probably not going to see an ACL tear from one of them where they're out the whole year or like a season-ending injury. But it's also highly unlikely that they're both going to make it through the whole season healthy. So for these like playoff type contests like this, that's a backfield. Also Arizona, I took Trey Benson. Those types of backfields where you have those dual, the two running backs, and it's an offense that I'm somewhat optimistic about. Those are the ones that I really like because just getting one of those guys on a lot of rosters. So if I end up with 20% Tony Pollard and 20% Tyjae Spears, like if either one of them misses, that stretch during the playoffs, the other one is that like game breaker for that 3 to 4 week stretch. Obviously people love to talk about, Kyren Williams from last year, like the guys who have just these massive seasons, but it's those in these playoff style contests. I love, same thing. I just took Brian Robinson, another one, the Commanders offense that could be really, really good with a younger quarterback and probably is going to get better as the season goes on. Again, he might just be like fine for most of the season. But then, if Eckler, an older back, fades down the stretch or misses some time, all of a sudden, now you're cooking. Take Dotson there. So little peek behind the paywall for some people, how with my 3 running backs so far, I've got Brian Robinson. I'll go to the draft board view. So Pollard, I have him paired up with a receiver in DeAndre Hopkins, Benson paired up with McBride, and Robinson paired up with Dotson. So all 3 of my running backs in those situations paired up with a pass catcher. Doesn't necessarily have to be with the quarterback, but I do love like the team stack aspect. I don't force the week 17 correlation as much as some others in the industry. And I dive into that a little bit behind the paywall. Why I'm not quite as, if it works out, I'm fine with it, but I don't like reach for it or force it the way some people like to advocate. To each their own, not saying I'm right about everything, but that's a strategy. I really like how this roster's been coming together so far.
Yeah, I think so far so good. It's a little thin for me so far on running back, but we've got 7 rounds to go.
Yeah. There was a question about from the Discord. So speaking of running backs, there's two running backs, Joe Mixon and DeAndre Swift. Just looking for thoughts on those. I've been kind of dominating the airtime so far, so I'll let you pick which one you want to talk about. Do you like them? Not like them? General thoughts.
Sure. So I'm gonna let you have Swift because I know that you're higher on him than I am. It's interesting because I think for me I'm somewhat of a risk adverse person, so I do like to have a little diversification. I know you're on the clock here, so I'll let you go.
I'll just we'll make it quick. I'll take Char. Do we want to talk about? I'll take Charbonnet, and then maybe Chubb falls back to me, and I'll take him. We'll see.
Yeah. To me, both of those are guys that I don't want to say actively avoiding, but I have more of Swift than I have of Mixon. And maybe that is just my DFS bias. To me, and obviously he's moved teams. So, it's hard to kind of see that, but like Joe Mixon is never a guy that I feel like I hardly ever roster. I feel like it's 1 week a season, OWS. I feel like it's 1 week a season that like he puts up a score that like actively hurts you for not having him. And obviously that's not, it's obviously different than a best ball. He's just a guy that I don't get to a lot. I think that he's a guy that's probably in these type of playoff type contests. He's probably a guy that I think that I would have some interest in, if I took Nico Collins in the second round, and I didn't even see where he went in this draft board, but if I've got Collins and Stroud, if I grab Stroud like on Jay Hawker's squad, that may be a team where if he fell to me or it made sense, that I would grab Mixon because I'm betting on Houston already. So maybe that would be a roster I would go to Mixon, but in general, he's not a guy I find myself clicking a lot. I much prefer several of the other players that go around him on drafters. But I do find myself getting to Swift from time to time. I know you feel like you've been dominating. I don't have a ton to really say because they're not guys that I really like personally.
See, I do like him.
I know that's why
I like Mixon. He's just, we saw I don't think Devin Singletary is like a special back. I think he's just like kind of just a guy. And he was really good in that Texans offense last year. And I think that you put Mixon, who we know can handle a large workload. We know, they didn't just trade for him. They signed him to, I think it was 3-year, $36 million deal. They gave him money with a couple.
They never make mistakes though.
Yeah, but it's what's the? It's hard for me to see outside of injury, which again, any NFL player can get injured. But he's going to be on the field a lot for an offense that we think is going to be pretty good.
Agree.
And he can, I think he's a much more capable pass catcher than what at times he was allowed to show in Cincinnati. I think that was more of a system thing. I remember when he came out, some of his highlights, he's a skilled pass catcher. I think he can do a lot. And you look at how Devin Singletary was racking up 4 or 5 catches a game last year. And if Dameon Pierce is getting run out of the building by Devin Singletary, I think Joe Mixon's going to dominate the work. And just a guy dominating the work on a good offense is something that I'm in on. I think the Swift discussion, I'm about to be on the board here. So here we go. Let's see if I can get this. Quarterbacks fly off the board on DraftKings. You don't know. You haven't drafted at all. Correct?
Yeah, I think what's good for you, and again, won't go too much behind the paywall, but you have an elite quarterback already.
Yeah.
So you probably only need one more.
Yeah, I'm fine with it for this team. I was more just like making an observation that across sites how different it is.
Oh yeah.
You
never see Will Levis go in the 14th round on drafters. That just doesn't
happen. Yeah, even like Geno, I think on drafters, I got Geno in like the 17th round yesterday.
18th. Yeah, even go in the 13th. But yeah, definitely different.
Here, I'll give my DeAndre Swift thoughts as soon as I make this pick. Let's see. Got McBride. On quarterback. Come on, buddy.
Would you consider Okonkwo here? Get a little bit more of that correlation with Tennessee?
No, at the next pick maybe. But I got to get my boy Isaiah Likely here. Okay, so DeAndre Swift. So I actually saw Hayden Winks and Josh Norris, two guys that work for Underdog. They had a YouTube video and they put it out on Twitter yesterday. It was 7 guys that they haven't drafted at all yet. I think they said they have like 70 drafts combined between the two of them, which your GIF you sent to me in the Discord, those are rookie numbers. You got to ratchet those up. Made me think of that. But DeAndre Swift was one of those guys and kind of made the case against him. And I can kind of see some of their points, but I've talked about this at other times. Like I just look at, he's going to catch the ball more than he did last year. Like he's just going to, he averaged 13 points a game, 13 fantasy points a game last season in full PPR formats. And it was his, I think, worst receiving from a receiving role, his worst output there. And he only scored 5 touchdowns on the season. So it's not like he had these outlier touchdowns. Now he's probably going to run the ball a little bit less, but we know that targets and receptions are far more important than carries for fantasy scoring, especially in full PPR. So I look at him last year in Philly. I look at him, which they knew that it was just a rental. I look at him 2 years ago in Detroit. He was like a 50% player. So I think the worries about Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson, but we're not drafting Swift in the 7th or 8th round as he doesn't need to be a bell cow. And we know he's an explosive back. We know he can catch passes. I just think the upside case for him, they were very down on him, but I don't know how much lower in a draft could he go? He's not going down by Devin Singletary, Javonte Williams. I mean, even guys like Spears and Robinson, it's hard for me to not have Swift above those guys. I think generally speaking, I think that 7th or 8th round, late 7th, early to mid 8th round is about right.
I don't disagree with you. I take him. I agree.
I'm up.
You're up.
We'll add Jonnu. We'll add a 3rd tight end here. So go ahead. You can.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's not a guy that I avoid. I agree with a lot of the things that you said. From where he's going, I don't like to get player takey, but in a vacuum of guys who are running backs that are going early 8th, late 7th, he's a guy that I like. There's at least 2 guys that I prefer better than him, but that's player takey.
Well, I know Zach Moss. Who else?
I'd rather have Connor than Swift personally.
Okay.
But yeah, Zach Moss is my highest owned running back right now. I have a hard time, not picking him when he falls to me in like the 9th round, which I see happen like a decent amount of the time, and it's like crazy. It's like, that's again a strong offense with a guy that we saw be pretty efficient last year. I don't see him being worse than Mixon.
Really?
Yeah, the player takey again. I don't know. I didn't think that Mixon was very efficient in his time in Cincinnati, and Cincinnati was always a strong offense under Burrow. I look at it and say,
I feel like the scheme I feel like running back can often be dependent on the scheme though, unless you're talking about like a CMC type guy. And even him, he kind of unlocked another level when he went to San Francisco. And I think a lot of the Bengals' success, I mean, for how long have we like agonized over, we wish Zach Taylor would throw at a higher rate and be more aggressive and like the play calling and stuff. Like the one year they finally opened it up at the end of the year, and kind of was a glimpse, but then they kind of like a glimpse into what they could be, but they kind of regressed back after that, I feel like. Whereas I think that you look at what what Bobby Slowick, what they're doing in Houston, is just a more aggressive, like there's going to be more openings. And also the Bengals offensive line has been like pretty bad. One of the things like in DFS the last couple of years we've talked about, like the Bengals were like just super predictable with their single high, like they were running into a lot of like loaded boxes and trying to force and throw the ball against shells. And that's part of why like Burrow had some struggles at some points. They just weren't like adjusting their play calling very well. So I think Mixon is like, I don't think he's like a CMC, Bijan, Saquon, like game breaker type talent running back, but I do think he's like, he can hold up to a workload. I think he is talented and like physically like gifted. And you put a guy like that in a more open offense that I guess calls plays better. And I think those efficiency metrics are going to look a lot different.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see it. I'm not arguing with you. He's not my favorite. I mean, he'll be 28 this month. So he's not that old.
It's okay if we disagree. Yeah, for sure.
I kind of like when we disagree. Like,
yeah, it's better than, I don't ever want to be we just like high five and tell each other how right we are on everything. Like I said this in a training session, like there's a bunch of things and I think it was in the Discord, somebody was asking questions and I was like giving my take and they were not arguing, but like trying to like defend the stance. And I was just like, this is, I'm just telling you what I think, like, and I'm going to be wrong about a lot of things. Like, if you're really confident in something, like just go with it, man.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm almost up here. Ooh, perfect.
I know where I want you to go, but that's okay. I think you're about to start the guy I want you to take. That's yours. I don't know that we need to take him now, but I don't know that it's worth. I don't know how many running backs each of those guys have.
I'm taking CEH.
That's where I want you to go.
Yeah, that was actually a question we had. Question from the Discord, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is he really the backup? If so, why is he drafted so far down the board? Who else would be the competition for the backup? I think a lot of it with him is just straight up like cognitive dissonance, or like, I think that's the right term. Just people being like fed up with, by now, if you've been playing DFS, best ball, like regular fantasy football for the last 3 years, at some point, like you've probably gotten the full Clyde Edwards-Helaire experience. I think that's relatively safe to say. I'll take Elijah Moore. Talk a bit about him. But I think, yeah, I mean, he's the backup running back. I like getting him on this roster paired with Mahomes and Worthy, just looking at like that quarterback running back combo. Again, this is playoff format on DraftKings, so later in the year, more touches will have accumulated for Pacheco. A higher chance that he maybe misses some time. So getting that Mahomes CEH combo could be profitable in the playoffs. So I like him, how he fit on this roster. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of people expecting Pacheco to have like an 80% workload and nobody really trusting that CEH will perform if given the opportunity, or that he'll, get like the full-time role. Running back's relatively replaceable. There could be a young guy or a veteran in camp that steps up. So, I think he's a guy that you could see move up a couple rounds. Looking at this draft board, you see where like guys like Bucky Irving, Braylon Allen, Tyrone Tracy, some of those younger guys, the rookies that went. Once we get into training camp and preseason and we see how these depth charts are shaking out, if some of those guys, they're not like early round picks, like they could be buried on a depth chart, so they could fall. And then a guy who's kind of like unknown, we know what he is and we know what he isn't with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So he's the type of guy who it's hard to get really excited about him in June and July. But if you get to August 15th and these other guys are falling and he's clearly the number 2 back for, a top 3, top 5 offense in the NFL, he's probably a guy who rises upwards 2 or 3 rounds by then.
I'm reading PG's comment in the Discord.
Yeah.
Mike Johnson walking me off a bridge.
Does that mean that I saved him or I pushed him off? Like walking him away from the bridge so he doesn't jump? I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, let's go with that. He said that I put him on the bridge. So maybe he's a guy taking a lot of Swift and Mixon, and I'm just like, I hate him.
Yeah, I'm the...
You're the savior.
Yeah. The hero they deserve, but not the one you need right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead. I'll just take Russell Wilson here, third quarterback. No correlations or anything, but the way the quarterbacks flew off the board, I had Mahomes, who basically I'm riding him, and then just took Young and Wilson as guys who should be, Young should be starting the entire season. Wilson looks like he'll be the starter at least early in the year. So getting that third quarterback on, the playoff formats, I'm telling you, man, like in the playoff formats, in my pods, the last 2 years in weeks 15 and 16, like I've seen multiple. I've had 1 or 2, not really the last 2 years because I learned my lesson, but it would have been 2 years ago. I was like sweating it out. It was week 16 if Daniel Jones would play or not. He was like super questionable. I think he was coming off a concussion or something. And one of my other quarterbacks was I think Lamar, and he was hurt. And then there was another late round guy that got benched. So like, yeah, I'm never rolling with 2 in these playoff style contests, just because there's so much to be lost when you get to week 17 or week 15 through 17. Like if you don't have a quarterback for one of those weeks, like that'd be a tough way to end it.
I don't want to disagree because I totally agree in the playoff type contest. It's interesting. I was not an OWS guy, but I was out in Phoenix earlier this year and met up with Zach Tribbett, who goes by Titletown. Not that I'm expecting him to be tuned in here. I was chatting with him. He actually won the Drafters contest like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And he actually, because it's very different scoring, it's cumulative scoring versus playoff. He was sharing with me. He actually won the contest without a starting quarterback score for 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah,
which obviously on a contest like DraftKings,
he did. I've dove into this in our training session. So he actually did. His two quarterbacks were Jalen Hurts and Zach Wilson, and Wilson, I believe he took Wilson's score in week 16, but it was like it was like 1.5 points or something. Like it was like real bad. I'm trying to pull it up. Here we go. Here, I'm gonna pull his.
Look at us doing it live. Putting you on the spot there.
Here, so yeah, you could kind of see his. Can you see this?
Yeah, the formatting's pretty terrible, but that's
yeah.
You can see it.
So week 17, he took zeros from Hurts and Wilson. I thought week 16 he got 1.7. Yeah. A funny story you bring him up too, because so obviously I took 7th last year. So I live in Northeast Wisconsin, like an hour south of Green Bay. His screen name Titletown, he's obviously from he's from like the Green Bay area, Titletown.
He is.
So my like best friend from childhood is runs a golf store here in town, and one of his like the main guys that works with him, he like is very like best friends or really good friends with.
He knows Zach.
With Zach, yeah. Like last summer, like at this time, he was talking to me because my buddy told him like what I do. And he's like, "Oh yeah, like my buddy actually won this best ball contest." I'm like, "Oh, what's his like screen name?" And he told me. I'm like, "Oh, okay, like that makes sense." But like then super small world. Apparently, Northeast Wisconsin is a hotbed for cumulative scoring best ball talent.
Mm-hmm. I'm just honored to be in your presence, Mike.
Yeah, there you go.
How we do on the questions? Did we cover them this week?
Good. Yeah. There's one more. Somebody asked about KJ Osborne. I guess just generally the wide receiver room in New England. I'll bring that up because there was a report this week talking about how basically Osborne and Jalen Polk and Demario Douglas were like kind of looking like the top 3 wide receivers at the moment, but Kendrick Bourne's still coming off an ACL, and Coach Speak Index. For those of you who are on Twitter, if you don't already, you should follow Coach Speak Index. He does a good job breaking down different situations and just reading the tea leaves. Like he like researches like how reliable different coaches are. But he talked about how Pierce made comments earlier in the offseason about basically everybody else is getting more reps because Bourne is out, like kind of talking up Bourne. So him coming back will change things a little bit. And then Javon Baker might be the physically most imposing wide receiver of the group. He is a 4th-round rookie, and he missed a big portion of OTAs, I think, with a hamstring injury. Rookie wide receivers and hamstrings are just like death, taxes, and that, like the 3 things you can rely on. Yeah, so it's basically, is Drake May good or not is what you're banking on, because I don't think like Brissett, even if he ends up as the starter, they're just going to be like a conservative, relatively unexciting offense. I think it just comes down to like, can Drake May be 70% of rookie Josh Allen? If he can, then that wide receiver room becomes like real interesting to figure out. But they're all cheap, so I think that if that turns out to be the case, getting it right could be one of those inflection points like I talked about in my training session last week.
Yeah, I think for me, I think May is probably the guy I have the most exposure to. And I'm not going to, and obviously he's not a wide receiver. Just because early on, May and June, a lot of drafts, he was going in the 20th round. And he'd be a guy I'd be happy to take as my third QB on rosters that it made sense to have a third QB. To me, I think Hilo, I think it was Hilo, I want to make sure I'm giving credit to the right person, posted something in our Discord a couple weeks ago that was just like the team total, like Vegas implied team totals, like for the whole season. And what stood out to me was how low New England's was. Like 50 points lower than the 31st team. Like just so low. And, how much worse could it get? But you're kind of banking on upside there. There are worse 20th round picks than KJ Osborne. He's not, I'm not trying to pull a PG here and walk somebody else off a bridge. I don't know that I have a single share of KJ Osborne. They're just not an offense that me personally that I'm taking a lot of shots on. They are cheap. So yeah, I mean, Baker, like there are guys that I'm taking in the 19th and 20th round. I think in terms of pass catcher, I think Hunter Henry is the guy I have the most of, and I don't have a ton, but I think that he's the guy I have the most of, just because again, he's a tight end that's going late. Again, drafters, that's what I know is he's 16th, 17th, 18th round tight end, and I'm willing to take a shot on him because he's generally my second or third tight end. And I think you see, I think the stats back this out with, historical data of rookie quarterbacks kind of liking their tight end, just kind of like a safety blanket. And we know, you've talked about on some of your training sessions, the archetype of tight ends that you like to target later in the drafts, kind of a peek behind the paywall. Hunter Henry is a guy that kind of fits that mold.
Yeah, I think sometimes that gets like overplayed, the whole like security blanket tight end thing. In general, I think it's like an auto. People just like go to it like, oh, rookie quarterback, like gonna love the security blanket. But sometimes you get rookie quarterbacks who like are way too aggressive and like they're just chucking it downfield. Like, and if you have a tight end that like isn't that talented, like there's a good chance that coaching staff uses them to like stay in and block. Like, let's keep this dude healthy. But I do think like this particular one, the Patriots don't have they don't have this like standout receiving core, and Henry is a pretty talented tight end. So I think it makes sense that, he could easily be like kind of the preferred target or like the, near the top of the target totem pole for the Patriots. We'll wrap up with, we did have one question in the comments from Mad Sox. He asked, last round, do you want third string wide receiver for your quarterback or a thin bring back like Slayton or Hyatt type? So this is one of the things where like, to me, like correlation matters. And it matters for different reasons on drafters than the playoff contest. But like, to me, this is one of the things that I think is like a relatively large mistake people make, is forcing that like, that third or fourth, that third string wide receiver for like maybe a middling or like even a good team. Like if they're available in the last round, I'm not going to like force them because I have their quarterback, just because I don't know that those types of guys are going to have the types of ceiling performances that are really going to separate. So to kind of answer the question, like I do like Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt types, just because I think that they can be like big play or 2 touchdown type guys. But I like them because of the type of player they are, not necessarily like, oh, I need to get them because I have their quarterback, or, to the earlier point, like I would prefer those guys over like Dortch that we talked about earlier, just because I think that their paths to like a 25-point week are a lot better. Even if Dortch outperforms them on total scoring for the year or whatnot.
Yeah, I think what I didn't love about this question, and I think it's in the live chat, right? So I didn't
Yeah.
see it.
You could, yeah.
I I was offended that he called Hyatt and Slayton Finn. Oh no, he didn't. Finn, like I like those guys. Those are guys that I'm taking a lot. Maybe not a lot.
Yeah, I think he meant like if you have like are you targeting? Because so many people like are thinking correlation so heavily. So he's basically saying, do you want like the third string like if you have Goff, do you want Khalif Raymond, or if you have Kyler, do you want Greg Dortch versus like do you take Slayton or Hyatt type if like you have Colts on the roster because they play the Colts week 17.
Sure.
So I
so that's actually a great question because I think we're gonna like your Goff example. Like I like Khalif Raymond. He's a guy.
I shouldn't have said him because I do like him. I like Elijah Moore for the Browns. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of guys that I like, but I guess my greater point is like they could have those guys that you're getting there. The correlation thing I think is a lot bigger deal for like when you're talking in the playoff contests. If I don't know if let me
yeah.
All right. If I have Devontae Adams on my roster and it's a playoff style contest, if he is last week 17, he had like a 40-point week.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know I think Aiden O'Connell had like 22, 23 points. But like I kind of would work the opposite way with that, like where a stud wide receiver might be able to carry like one of these weaker quarterbacks as opposed to like needing to like one of these receivers could have like a usable week, 15 to 20 points. That doesn't mean their quarterback has more than 12 or 15 points. So like I'm not forcing that correlation there.
Yeah, I was even having to think like who you were using Devontae Adams. I was like, I think it's Trey Tucker. Like, who is the wide receiver 3 for the Raiders?
So I think
you know what I mean? Like, those are guys that are not getting drafted.
Yeah, well, and I think so. Like they've got Adams and Myers, and so I think that is a situation very similar to what I talked about with the Cardinals, right? How I said I think Ryman's going to play more than people think, and McBride will be split out and kind of moved around like a chess piece. The Bills did it a little bit last year. Dawson Knox played a lot as like the inline tight end. They moved Dalton Kincaid. He played the slot. They'd move him out wide as like a chess piece. I think the Raiders are going to do that with Brock Bowers. They've talked about how versatile he is, how dynamic he is with the ball in his hands. Like they give him the ball in reverses. They line him up in the backfield. So I think like Michael Mayer was drafted in the second round last year. I think Mayer is going to play a lot. And I think Bowers is going to be moved around a lot. And I think kind of him, Jacoby Myers and Adams are all going to be like relatively involved. And I guess that's a good segue. And
I think they signed Harrison Bryant too, from Cleveland too. He had some games when Njoku was, out for injury last year. Like he had some decent games. He's an athlete, Harrison Bryant. So, I don't know outside of Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, I don't know that there's too many wide receivers that I would even consider.
Well, they've got Trey Tucker and they have Michael Gallup, who is
and they've got Jalen Guyton, who was an early draft pick too, right? Or was he on?
No, he wasn't an early draft pick. He just had some good games with the
Chargers.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he wasn't. I don't know when he was drafted, but it wasn't early. Sorry, I'm just pulling up the Raiders. But yeah, their quarterback situation will be interesting to watch because they've got some talent there. They've got some skill. They've got some guys who can play.
Out of Dallas in 2019, Jalen Guyton. Looked it up. hard to keep track of all this stuff, man.
Yeah. That's what we're here for.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone for tuning in. We got
appreciate
300 live viewers. What's that? Uh-oh. I don't know if it's me or Billy. Billy, you there? Uh-oh. All right, looks like Billy's feed dropped. All right, I didn't know if that was me or him, but thank you all for tuning in. Yeah, I think we got a lot. We talked about a lot today. Again, reminder: if you have not already started playing on Drafters, their $15 million contest, $2.5 million prize pool is like 15% full. They've got a ton of promotions going on there. If you sign up, if you make your first deposit, you use code OWS, as you can see on the bottom of the screen. You'll get a match up to $100 on that deposit. Check that out. Oh, Billy's back. I'm just giving the final spiel. You good, Billy?
Yeah, you dropped on my end. It's probably my internet, just because I literally had Comcast here 2 hours ago. So
yeah, So we're gonna hop off. Just thanking the people, telling them about Drafters. So check that out. We have the deposit code, the contest. There's a ton of overlay. They've got promotions. I'm sure they'll have a July one coming out. But yeah, go ahead, check out oneweekseason.com. Best Ball Plus 2024. Our price just dropped. Still get all the previous training sessions, which is a lot of evergreen stuff, and we'll get you ready for the season. So thank you for hanging out with us. We will see you next week. We will see you at the draft, in the draft rooms, and at the top of the leaderboards. Thank you, Billy. Good night. Uh-oh.
1 week season.